The crash that should never have happened. The desert of Kepler 9 was quiet in a way that felt heavy, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Rust-colored sand stretched to the horizon, broken only by black stone ridges and the distant shimmer of heat. Lieutenant Jack Reeves moved along the eastern perimeter of outpost Kepler with steady steps, his boots crunching softly. He had walked this route so many times that he could have done it with his eyes closed. Nothing ever happened out here. That was the point. Jack checked his wrist display. Radiation levels normal. No movement. No signals. Another boring shift. Then his helmet screamed. The alarm shrilled so suddenly that Jack flinched, his heart jumping into his throat. Before he could even curse, a streak of fire tore across the sky. Smoke carved a dark line through the thin clouds, moving fast, too fast to be natural. "Impact incoming," his suit confirmed calmly. Jack was already running. The ground shook as something slammed into the dunes several hundred meters away. Sand exploded upward, and a deep roar rolled across the desert like thunder. Jack sprinted toward the crash site, one hand gripping the medical kit bouncing against his hip. Training took over, pushing fear aside. Whatever had fallen out of the sky, someone might still be alive. When he reached the site, he slowed, breathing hard. An escape pod lay half buried in the sand, its surface scorched and cracked. A long gouge marked where it had skidded across the ground before slamming into a rock outcrop. Strange symbols were burned into the metal. Nothing Jack recognized from any human design. Steam hissed from broken seams. "Okay," Jack muttered. "That's new." He activated his helmet scanners, sweeping the pod for radiation, toxins, or anything else that could kill him in seconds. The results came back uncertain. On the frontier, that usually meant probably safe enough. The hatch was gone. Emergency bolts were scattered across the sand, blown outward. Whoever had been inside had forced their way out. That meant they had been conscious after the crash. That meant hope. Jack climbed up and leaned into the opening, his headlamp cutting through smoke and darkness. She was slumped against the far wall. At first glance, Jack thought she was human. Her shape was familiar, her size close to his own. But then the light caught her face, and his breath caught. Her ears were long, swept back elegantly instead of round. Her skin held a warm, faintly golden tone that no human had. One arm was burned badly, the fabric of her flight suit torn and blackened. "Definitely not human," Jack whispered. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. His scanner showed a strong pulse and no internal bleeding. Burns, impact trauma, exhaustion. But she was alive. Jack stood there for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. Unknown alien. No communications. No authorization. The nearest medical facility that could even attempt alien treatment was days away. Protocol said he should seal the area, report the contact, and wait. Jack ignored protocol. Carefully, he lifted her from the wreckage. She was lighter than he expected, her head resting weakly against his shoulder. As he carried her away, the sun dipped lower, painting the desert in copper and shadow. Above them, Kepler's 3 moons began their slow rise, silent witnesses to a choice that would change everything. Jack took her to his quarters. They were small, barely more than a storage room with a bed and a desk. But they were private. The medical bay would raise questions, too many questions. He laid her gently on the bed and began treating her burns with the limited supplies he had. The injuries looked painful but not fatal. Whoever she was, she had survived something violent. "She's tough," Jack murmured, more to himself than to the quiet room. She did not wake. Hours turned into days. Jack kept up his normal duties, answered questions, laughed at jokes he barely heard. Every few hours, he returned to his quarters to check her vitals, adjust the improvised IV, and make sure she was still breathing. Each time, relief washed over him when the scanner confirmed she was stable. On the 3rd night, exhaustion finally caught him. Jack fell asleep sitting at his desk, his head resting on his arms. A sound woke him, soft, unfamiliar. Jack lifted his head slowly. She was awake. She sat on the edge of the bed, watching him with glowing eyes that reflected the dim emergency lights. Her posture was tense but controlled, like a warrior forcing herself to remain calm. When she spoke, her voice was rough, but her words were perfectly clear. Where am I? She asked. And why does everything smell like recycled air? In desperation? Jack blinked. Then, despite himself, he laughed. You're at Outpost Kepler, he said. Least exciting place in the sector. I'm Jack. You crashed 3 days ago. She studied him closely, her gaze sharp and intelligent. I did not crash, she said. Crashing implies failure. I had a disagreement with a meteor field. How did that go? Jack asked. The meteors won. She winced, touching her bandaged arm. Jack stepped forward carefully, offering her water. She accepted it but never stopped watching him. What is your name? Jack asked. Vra, she said softly. The name felt important, heavy with meaning. Before Jack could ask anything else, her expression shifted. Fear flickered across her face, quick but real. Her hand tightened in the blanket, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she said something that made Jack's blood run cold. Please, she said, do not let my mother find me. Jack stared at her, 1,000 questions rising at once. Outside, far beyond the quiet desert, something ancient and powerful had already begun to search. The secret she was never meant to share. The first thing Jack noticed was how Vera listened, not just with her ears but with her whole body. Every sound in the outpost, the hum of generators, the distant wind scraping sand against metal, the faint echo of boots in the corridors, made her tense. She sat on the edge of the bed, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, eyes sharp and alert, as if danger could break through the walls at any moment. Jack pretended not to notice. He moved slowly, keeping his hands visible, careful not to startle her. You're safe, he said. At least as safe as anyone gets out here. Vera let out a quiet breath, but her shoulders did not relax. Safety, she replied, is a temporary condition. Jack frowned. You talk like someone who's been running a long time. Her eyes flicked to him. For a moment he thought she would stay silent. Then she asked, how long before others of your kind come looking for me? Humans? Jack shrugged. Weeks, maybe months. If comms stay down, longer. That is acceptable, she said, though the word sounded forced. Days passed and Vera grew stronger. She learned quickly how the doors worked, how to adjust the temperature, how to hide her surprise when she tasted human food. Jack noticed she avoided mirrors and windows. At night, she barely slept, waking at the slightest noise. One evening, Jack returned from patrol to find her standing near the small desk, staring at a holographic image of Earth rotating slowly above the surface. This is your home, she said. Yeah, Jack answered. One of them. Anyway. It is small, she said, then added almost gently, but loud. Jack smiled faintly. That's a fair description. She turned to him then, and for the first time, the mask slipped. Fear crossed her face, raw and unguarded. They will not forgive me, she said. Jack stiffened. Who? My people. Silence stretched between them, heavy and fragile. Outside, the wind howled across the desert like a warning. I was not supposed to be there, Vera continued. I was not supposed to choose. Choose what? Jack asked. She hesitated, then straightened, as if accepting an unavoidable fate. I am bound by law, she said. By blood. By duty. My future was decided before I was born. Jack leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Sounds familiar. Her eyes narrowed. You mock me. No, Jack said quietly. I understand more than you think. Vera studied him, searching for lies, for weakness. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her, because she spoke again, her voice lower now. I fled, she said. I rejected the union they demanded of me. A political bond, a weapon disguised as marriage. Jack's stomach tightened. And they let you just leave? A bitter smile touched her lips. No. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. They sent hunters. Jack's hand twitched toward his sidearm before he remembered where he was. Are they coming here? They are always coming, Vera replied. They do not stop. That night, the alarm stayed silent, but tension hung thick in the air. Jack found it hard to sleep. So did Vera. Near dawn, when the lights dimmed automatically, Jack heard a sharp intake of breath from the bed. He turned. Vera was curled inward, hands pressed to her abdomen, her face pale with pain. Hey, Jack said, moving quickly. What's wrong? She shook her head, breathing hard. It is too soon, she whispered. This was not meant to happen here. Jack froze. Vra, what are you talking about? She looked up at him, eyes shining with something dangerously close to tears. My people evolve slowly, she said. Our bodies do not accept change easily. But humans, she swallowed. Humans change everything they touch. Jack felt the room tilt. Are you saying, yes, she said. There is life growing inside me. The words hit him like a physical blow. A child? He asked softly. She nodded once. If my mother discovers this, she will not see a daughter. She will see a mistake that must be erased. Jack ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. An alien child, a hunted royal, an outpost with broken communications. It was insane. But when he looked at Vray, really looked, he saw not a threat, not a political disaster, but a woman terrified for her future and her child. You're not alone, he said before he could stop himself. Vray stared at him. You do not understand what you are offering. Maybe not, Jack replied, but I know what it means to walk away. She reached out suddenly, gripping his sleeve with surprising strength. If I stay, she said, voice shaking, my child will be born beyond their control. That alone is an act of war. Before Jack could respond, every light in the room flickered. A low vibration rolled through the outpost, deep and powerful, unlike anything Jack had felt before. His wrist display came alive with warnings, symbols flashing red. Vra turned toward the ceiling, her face drained of color. They have found me, she whispered. Outside, the sky above Kepler 9 began to darken, not with night, but with shadows moving against the stars. And for the first time since the crash, Jack understood one terrifying truth. The outpost was no longer invisible. The child who changed the stars. The sky over outpost, Kepler did not turn dark all at once. At first it was only a shadow, thin, almost imagined, sliding across the upper atmosphere. Jack noticed it while standing on the watch platform, squinting against the glare of the suns. His instincts tightened. Shadows didn't move like that. Not here. His wrist display chimed softly. Unidentified mass detected. Jack swallowed. Below him, the outpost carried on as usual. Technicians argued over equipment. Cargo drones drifted lazily between storage bays. No one else had noticed yet. That made it worse. He hurried back inside. Vra felt it before he reached the door. She stood in the center of his quarters, one hand pressed to her stomach, the other gripping the edge of the desk. Her breathing was shallow, controlled with effort. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw certainty. Not fear this time, but knowledge. They are not attacking, she said. They are watching. Jack's jaw tightened. That doesn't make me feel better. It should not, Vra replied. The next weeks passed under a kind of false calm. The shadows in the sky faded, but Vra's condition became impossible to hide. Her body changed faster than Jack expected. Alien biology mixed with something else, something unpredictable. Medical scanners struggled to interpret the data. But one thing was clear. The child was growing. Jack adjusted his entire life without fully realizing it. Patrols became shorter. Nights grew longer. He learned how to cook meals that didn't make Vra nauseous. He learned how to sit in silence without trying to fix things. Most of all, he learned how fear could exist alongside hope. One night during a violent sandstorm, it happened. The outpost shook as winds screamed against the walls. Emergency lights snapped on. Jack barely made it back to his quarters before Vera cried out, collapsing to her knees. "This is wrong," she gasped. "It is too soon." Jack dropped beside her, hands trembling despite his training. He activated every medical program he had. Jury-rigging systems never meant for this. His mind screamed that he was unqualified, that he was about to lose both of them. But Vra looked at him, gripping his arm with fierce strength. "Stay," she said. "Do not leave." "I'm here," Jack replied. "I'm not going anywhere." The hours that followed blurred together. Pain, alarms, whispered words Jack barely understood. And then suddenly a sound cut through the chaos. A cry. High, sharp, alive. Jack froze as the child drew breath again, stronger this time. His chest felt too tight, his vision blurring as realization crashed over him. Against every law of the galaxy, the child had survived. Vra lay back, exhausted, tears sliding silently into her hair. Jack wrapped the small, fragile form in a clean, thermal cloth and placed the child gently in her arms. The baby's eyes opened. They were bright, curious, unafraid. The child looked past Vra, straight at Jack. A tiny hand reached out, fingers closing around his. Jack's breath caught. Vra watched them, her expression unreadable. Then she whispered something in her own language, a word heavy with meaning. Jack frowned. "What did you say?" Vra hesitated. "I named you. I don't understand." "In my culture," she said slowly, "a child recognizes protection before blood. The one they reach for first is bound." Jack laughed weakly. "Bound how?" Before she could answer, the child made a soft sound and pressed closer to him. Vra closed her eyes, accepting what she already knew. "She has chosen you," Vra said. "She calls you husband." The word hit Jack like a shockwave. "That's not possible," he said. I mean, she's a baby." "In your culture," Vra replied, "the word means love. In mine, it means guardian, partner, the one who stands between." Jack stared at the child in his arms. Something ancient and powerful settled into place, a weight he had never asked for. Outside, the outpost alarm screamed to life. Red lights flooded the corridors. Jack's wrist display flashed a message he had hoped never to see. Multiple warp signatures detected. Vra rose unsteadily, her face calm in a way that terrified him. "She knows," Vra said. "My mother knows." Jack turned toward the window. The sky was no longer empty. Massive shapes hung above the planet, blotting out the stars. Alien warships, their hulls alive with light, moved into position with terrifying precision. A single transmission cut through every channel, every frequency. The voice that followed was cold, commanding, and filled with rage barely restrained. "Return my daughter." The child in Jack's arms stirred, eyes glowing softly. And for the first time in his life, Jack understood something with perfect clarity. This was not about politics. This was about a mother who ruled the stars, and a child who had chosen a human to stand in her way. The queen who came to claim her blood. The air inside Outpost Kepler felt heavier than gravity. Jack stood near the main viewport, the child cradled against his chest as the sky outside changed from blue to black. Alien warships filled the horizon, vast, elegant, terrifying. Their hulls glowed with symbols that pulsed like living veins. Each ship moved with perfect control, as if the stars themselves made way for them. Vra stepped beside Jack, her posture straight despite her exhaustion. She looked smaller than the Empire hovering above them, yet something in her expression was unbroken. "She will not wait long," Vra said quietly. "My mother does not repeat commands." A deep vibration rolled through the outpost. Consoles flickered, distant alarms wailed, then died, overridden by a force that did not ask permission. A beam of light struck the desert beyond the perimeter. The sand melted into glass. From the light, a structure formed, smooth, black, and towering. A landing platform grew out of nothing, its edges sharp as a blade. Then the light dimmed, and she appeared, the alien queen. She was tall, wrapped in armor that shimmered like liquid night. A crown of living crystal rose from her head, casting a cold glow across her face. Her eyes burned with authority so absolute that even the air seemed to bow. She walked forward without hurry, every step measured, every movement precise. Soldiers followed her, dozens of them, silent, armored, unstoppable. Jack felt the child stir. The queen's gaze locked onto the outpost. "Bring me my daughter," her voice boomed, echoing through metal and bone alike. Jack swallowed and stepped forward. The main doors slid open under foreign control. The queen entered. She did not look at the outpost staff. She did not look at the walls or the machines. Her eyes went straight to Vra, then to the child, then slowly to Jack. Her lips curled in something like disgust. "So," the queen said, her voice low and sharp, "this is where you hid." Vra did not bow. "I did not hide," she replied. "I chose." The queen laughed once, a sound without warmth. "You abandoned your duty. You betrayed your blood." Her gaze snapped back to Jack. And you, she said, are nothing. Jack felt anger rise hot and sudden, but he held it down. He tightened his grip on the child instead. The queen took one step closer. The child opened her eyes. She looked at the queen, and then turned her head away, pressing her face into Jack's chest. A small hand clenched his collar. Her voice was soft, barely a sound, but it carried. Don't, she whispered. My husband is here. The room went silent. Every soldier froze. The queen stopped mid-step. Slowly, she turned her head back toward Jack, her eyes blazing. What? She said, each word shaking the air. Did my daughter just call you? Jack's heart hammered, but he did not move. She calls me husband, the queen roared. Why does my daughter call you husband, human? The word human was an insult, sharpened by rage. Jack took a breath. Because I stayed, he said simply. The queen's eyes narrowed. You presume to speak? You asked, Jack replied. I answered. Vra watched him, fear and pride battling in her expression. The queen circled Jack slowly, studying him like a flawed tool. You are weak. You have no throne, no fleet, no bloodline worth naming. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. You are temporary. Jack met her gaze. Then why does she choose me? The queen's jaw tightened. She is a child, the queen said. She does not understand power. Jack looked down at the girl in his arms. Her eyes were bright, calm, unafraid. No, he said. She understands safety. The queen straightened, fury rolling off her in waves. You dare teach me about my own child? I'm not teaching you, Jack said. I'm showing you. He gestured around the small outpost. I had nothing to gain by saving Vra. Nothing to gain by staying. No orders, no reward. I did it because it was right. The queen laughed again, louder this time. Morality is a luxury of the powerless. Then explain this, Jack said quietly. He tapped his wrist display, projecting medical scans into the air. Records of burns treated, nights without sleep, systems rebuilt by hand. She lived because I worked with broken tools, Jack said. Your empire would have let her die waiting for permission. A murmur spread among the soldiers. The queen's eyes flickered. You would defy an empire for one life? She asked. Jack nodded. For my family. The word hit harder than any weapon. The queen turned to the child. Come to me, she commanded. The child tightened her grip on Jack. No, she said softly. The queen froze. For the first time, uncertainty crossed her face. Jack took a step forward, his voice steady. You can take her by force, he said, but you'll prove to her that power matters more than love. The queen stared at him, the room trembling with the weight of her anger. Then she spoke, her voice cold as space. This is not over, human, she said. If you stand in my way, you will stand trial before the stars. Jack didn't flinch. Then I'll stand, he said. Outside, the warships shifted position, and across the galaxy, the question spread like fire. What kind of human dares challenge a queen? When humanity stood before the stars did not feel distant anymore. They loomed. Jack stood at the center of a vast chamber carved from black crystal, its walls alive with shifting light. This was not a room meant for comfort or fairness. It was a place designed to crush resolve. The air hummed with power, pressing down on him like an invisible weight. He was alone. No weapons, no armor, no rank, just a human. Above him, the chamber opened into darkness, and from that darkness, the queen emerged. She descended on a platform of light, her presence commanding silence. Rows of alien nobles lined the upper tiers, their eyes glowing with curiosity and contempt. This is the High Tribunal, the queen announced, where lies are stripped bare and weakness is exposed. Jack kept his posture steady. The child sat beside the queen now, perched on a raised seat, her small legs dangling. She watched Jack closely, eyes bright and calm. Vra stood behind her, silent, her expression unreadable. Human, the queen said, you stand accused of trespass, genetic theft, and binding royal blood without consent. Jack exhaled slowly. I saved a life. Laughter rippled through the chamber. You claim virtue, the queen said, yet you defy law. Jack lifted his gaze. Your law. The murmurs grew louder. The queen raised a hand, and silence fell again. Your species survives by chaos, she said. You lack unity. You lack discipline. You lack worth. Jack nodded once. All true. The nobles shifted, surprised. But, Jack continued, we also lack permission to care. The queen's eyes narrowed. Jack stepped forward, the weight pressing harder. When Vra crashed, I didn't know who she was. I didn't know she mattered to anyone powerful. I helped her because she was bleeding. A projection appeared above him, images pulled from his suit recordings. The crash, the burns, the long nights. Jack asleep in a chair beside a bed. She lived because I broke rules, Jack said. Your empire would have waited for clearance. The queen's voice cut sharp. You confuse disorder with virtue. Jack looked up at the child. Ask her why she chose me. The queen hesitated, just for a moment. Child, she said, her tone softer now, controlled. Why do you call this human husband? The chamber held its breath. The child stood, small but steady. He stayed, she said simply. When mother ran. A shockwave of whispers rippled through the tribunal. Vra's breath caught. The queen's face hardened. That is not true. The child tilted her head. You sent ships, she said, not help. Silence fell again, this time deeper, heavier. Jack felt something shift. Not in the room, but in the balance of power. The queen descended another level, her voice dangerous and quiet. You would shame me with the words of a child? Jack met her gaze. Children don't lie about safety. The queen turned to the nobles. This human claims morality as strength. He claims care as power. Jack raised his voice, steady despite the pressure. We don't conquer because we're better, he said. We survive because we protect what matters, even when it costs us. A noble stepped forward. Your empire rules by fear, the alien said to the queen. The human rules nothing, and yet he is chosen. The queen's jaw tightened. You would undo tradition, she said to Jack, with weakness? Jack shook his head. With choice. The child walked down from her seat, crossing the chamber alone. Every guard stiffened, but none moved. She stopped in front of Jack and took his hand. I choose him, she said. The chamber erupted. The queen stared at the two of them, rage and something else twisting behind her eyes. Slowly, painfully, she lowered herself. Not to Jack, to the child. Gasps echoed through the hall. You challenge me, the queen said softly to her daughter. In front of the stars. The child nodded. I challenge fear. The queen closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice carried across the chamber. Human, she said, you have no throne, no empire, no claim. Jack swallowed. But, she continued, you have done what my fleets could not. She stood. The trial is not over, the queen declared, but the stars will remember this moment. As Jack was escorted from the chamber, he felt it, the weight of countless eyes watching him not as prey, but as something new, a question. And across the galaxy, a dangerous idea began to take root. What if humanity's greatest weapon was not its strength, but its heart? The day a human became legend. The galaxy did not change all at once. It shifted, quietly, uneasily, like a giant realizing it could no longer sleep the same way again. Jack Reeves stood at the edge of the Queen's flagship, staring out through a wall of living crystal at the endless stars. Beyond them waited fleets, empires, and futures that would soon be rewritten. Behind him, the chamber of judgment lay silent, emptied of nobles who had watched a human bend tradition without lifting a weapon. The Queen approached without ceremony. You have disrupted balance, she said. Do you understand the danger of that? Jack did not turn. Balance that survives by fear deserves disruption. The Queen paused. You speak as though you are not afraid. Jack finally faced her. I am. I just didn't let it choose for me. A soft sound drew their attention. The child walked between them, her steps unsteady but determined. She looked up at the Queen, then back at Jack, as if measuring two worlds inside her small frame. The Queen knelt, not as ruler, but as mother. You cannot keep both, the queen said gently. One day she must choose her people. Jack lowered himself to the child's level. And one day she'll choose for herself. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then she made an offer that rippled across the command deck like a shockwave. Stay, she said. I will give you a title, authority, protection beyond your species' imagining. The bridge crew froze. Jack did not hesitate. No, he said. The queen blinked. You refuse power? I refuse ownership, Jack replied. She isn't a symbol. She's a person. The queen rose slowly. In my empire, she said, those words end wars. She gestured and the stars outside rearranged themselves as fleets began to withdraw. One by one, massive warships turned away from Kepler 9. Across thousands of worlds, sensors recorded the impossible. The queen had stood down. Vera stepped forward, tears silent on her cheeks. You changed everything, she said. Jack shook his head. No, she did. The child squeezed his hand. From that day forward, stories spread faster than ships could travel. Of a human who stood unarmed before a queen. Of a child who chose safety over bloodline. Of an empire that learned restraint. Years later, on worlds light years apart, parents told their children a new kind of legend, not of conquest, but of a human who taught the stars a dangerous truth, that the strongest force in the universe was not fear, not power, not empire, but the courage to stay when leaving would be easier. And somewhere on a quiet frontier world, under 3 familiar moons, Jack Reeves walked home with his family, not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as something far rarer, a human the stars remembered.